Hi, Professor Ackerman here. In this short video, I want to show you how to use the YX5300. It's a serial control module that can play MP3 songs or sounds that you load onto an SD card, and you can trigger that very easily with an Arduino or the other microcontroller. This particular one I'm going to show you is generic to the YX5300 chip that this board contains. But this particular one is made by Aideepen, and it's a pretty nice little module that can play whatever sound or song you want. So if you check out the documentation, there's not a lot here. There's some ratings, there's some answered questions that show you a couple of different options in terms of how you interact with this. But we can see that because there's an RX and a TX, and then VCC and ground, this is a serial module. It says SerialMP3Player. So we have to figure out how to hook this up, and instead of writing the serial code ourselves, it's best to find a library that's easy to use that can play whatever song or sound we load onto the SD card. So I'm going to show you the fastest way to get this working and show you some tips and tricks on how you can integrate this in your Arduino code. So first things first, we've got our little board right here. We can connect it, and then we can also load up our song onto the SD card. Okay, so first I'll show you the electrical connections. Pretty simple in this example. So I do have a Bluetooth speaker here. So let me expand this window. All right, so I've got my Bluetooth speaker. It's got an auxiliary audio cable. So I am going to hook that up and then get ready to play through the SerialMP3 player. All right, so just standard 3.5 millimeter auxiliary audio cable jack. These pins are already soldered, which is pretty nice with this board. I've got ground, VCC, TX, and RX. So I'm going to plug those into the breadboard. Anywhere really is fine. All right. So I am going to plug in. I've got, let's see. So first I got the ground pin. So we're going to connect this to ground. I'm going to make a ground and plus 5 volt connection to the Arduino. Right there. Right there, cool. Now I'm going to connect to VCC to 5 volts on the Arduino. All right, next up we've got TX and RX. So I'm going to make the yellow TX and the orange RX. Okay, so we're going to leave the TX and RX disconnected for right now. We'll come back to this when we're wiring it up because you actually have to flip the TX and RX for this particular board. At least I did to get this working. So it's kind of an interesting little nuance that we have to be aware of. But let's take a look at what the library looks like and look at a simple example code. But first, what I want to do is actually show how to get your own song onto the SD card. So we're going to get a micro SD card. All right. So I've got the micro SD card. I'm going to plug it in over here on my computer with I just have the standard micro SD card reader, which I can then plug in a micro SD card right here. It is the micro card, not the larger card. So you got to make sure you have a micro SD to use this device. Whereas this is what a normal SD card looks like. That's the micro SD, so quite a bit smaller. All right, so we got that plugged in. Let's get it on our computer. All right, so I heard the sound that indicates that the computer recognized the micro SD. So I'm going to open up a new File Explorer window. Let's go to this PC, and there's my SD card, micro SD. Okay. So, all right. All right, so then I've got my micro SD card. All right, so there is my micro SD card on this PC right there. So I don't have any song on here just yet. What I am going to do is plug in my song. Now you can have multiple files on here, but just to keep it simple in this quick tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to get one song working. And I'll show you also how you can do 2 songs, just show you what the code looks like. But we're just going to stick with one song. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V that over here. All right, and the file name doesn't need to be anything in particular, but it should be an MP3 file. Okay, cool. So that's good on the SD card side of things. And I unplugged it. Now I'm going to pull out the micro SD card, plug it back into the SD card reader. All right, awesome. Now when I did plug that in, one thing to note is there will be a nice clicking sound, just like a standard micro SD card. So we've got, it's got to go in the correct orientation. You want to make sure you hear that click. And it should be a little spring-loaded action so that you know it's secured in there. That looks good though. All right. So next up, we've got to work on the code. So the way that I like to get this thing working, there's a couple of libraries you can use. You can find a couple online, but the easiest is simply to go to the built-in library that we can find by going to Manage Libraries. So we go to Sketch, Include Library, Manage Libraries. All right, so I'm going to wait for that to load up. I'm going to copy the YX5300 because that's the library I'm looking for. I'm going to paste that in here, YX5300. All right, and then these two pop up. So we've got this first one and then this second one. They both work just fine. I prefer this SerialMP3Player by Salvador Rueda. It's just a very simple library that has some nice documentation. It makes it pretty easy to use. This one has more advanced functionality. It's a little bit harder to use. There's even others online, but we're going to go with SerialMP3Player by Salvador Rueda. And I already have mine installed, but if you haven't installed it, you'll see a little install button down here. So click that, then it'll say installed, and we're good to go. Okay, because I have the library installed, I'm going to check out an example from him. So we're going to go to examples. We're going to go down to where I have the SerialMP3Player. Your list may vary in size, but from custom libraries, we're going down here to SerialMP3Player. He's got a basic commands example that walks you through different commands, like how to skip songs and select songs and do more advanced things. But I'm just going to go to the play hello world example. Keep it really simple. Okay, let's expand that. Okay, so he has some documentation up here with a comment to explain what's needed. So they say TX goes to pin 11 and RX goes to pin 10. So we can try that, but what's a little bit weird about this board is it's a little bit different than you might expect. So TX says 11 and RX says 10. So we're going to connect the yellow TX to 11 and the orange RX to pin 10. Okay. We've got the MP3 player library installed, SerialMP3Player to H. We've got the two different pins for serial communication, transmit TX and receive RX. This sets up the MP3 object. And then down here in our void setup, we set the serial.begin 9600. That just starts a serial monitor, so we can start the serial interface to communicate. MP3.begin, same deal, just for the MP3 library communication. Short delay for the initialization. And then this command is important to select the SD card. Basically, this just is a standard input that we use in the void setup for this library. And then also wait for the initialization. Once that void setup is done running the first time when the code turns on or power is restored for the first time, then we are going to go to our loop. Very simple loop here. So we're just going to loop back and forth. We have mp3.play. It's going to play whatever MP3 file you have. So this says hello world, but I don't have hello.mp3. I've got song_2, but it should play just fine. And it'll wait 3 seconds and then play it again. So let's see if this very simple code does the trick. So I'm going to make sure I have the right port selected. Arduino Uno, great. All right, I'm going to make sure the Bluetooth speaker's on here. Okay, so I don't know if you can hear that, but there's nothing to hear. So it's not playing. So this serial communication device I found, it actually needs to be connected to TX actually should be, and RX should be flipped on the Arduino. It's a little bit weird. So actually TX should go to pin 10 and RX should go to pin 11. There we go. All right, I couldn't help it. Every time I do audio demo, gotta do a little Rickroll. All right, so it played that entire clip of Rickroll, and then it waited 3 seconds to start playing it again. So looks like it's working just fine. All right, very cool. So that's working great. I'm going to disconnect power for 1 second. If you want to do other more advanced things, we can have this MP3.play trigger when, let's say, a button's pressed or when you have some if statement or other logic in your code. And you can essentially just locate this wherever you want. So that's a very simple example. I've got a button over here. So we're just going to add in the button. Okay, so I'm just going to add in the button here. One end's going to go to an input. The other end's going to go to 5 volts. And this input's going to be, I don't know, pin 8. Why not? That'll work. So now I've just got the button. One side's going to 5 volts with this yellow wire, and the other side's going to pin 8. And I'm going to set this up as an input pull up, so when I press that button, it'll trigger the song to play. All right, so a simple way to get that going is I can simply initialize a pin. So I'm going to switch over here. Okay, so I hooked up the wire to, I'm just going to call it play. Oh, not play. That looks like it's reserved. I'm going to say start. Nope, that's reserved too. Let's just call it X. X equals 8. All right, that's going to be my pin. I'm going to set that up as an input pull up. So pin mode. That's going to be set up variable X. And it's going to be an input. It's going to be pulled up to 5 volts. So I don't need a resistor with the button. And I'm going to digital read that pin X. I'm going to say, I can either assign this to a variable, or I could simply say if digital read of X is equal to, I need 2 equals there, so it's equivalent to. So if digital read of X is equivalent to, when I press it, because it's input pull up to high, it'll be high by default. So if it's low, I want it to play the MP3. So there we go. Instead of using a semicolon, I will put squiggly brackets around that to start and stop the if statement. And then I'll slow down the button as well, or the overall code, so I don't need to run this too quickly. All right, so in this void loop, basically, I'm just looping through. If the digital read of the button pin X, which is on pin 8, it goes low, that means I press the button, and then I want to play the MP3 file, and then wait, let's say a second. And this delay just slows down the loop, which just runs very quickly. So let's try that. All right, here we go. Let's press the button. All right, so I will now press the button. See if this plays. All right. That's because I need to hook this up to low. There we go. All right, so now I've got this yellow wire going to low, this blue wire going to pin 8. Nominally, it's reading high. When I press it, it'll connect it to low. Now it should play. All right. All right, so I've got the yellow wire hooked up to the ground pin, and then the blue wire hooked up to pin 8. When I give this 5 volts, when I press this button, it should turn on the MP3 player. Let's do it. So when I press the button, it'll make the blue wire, which is on pin 8, it'll go to ground, so it'll read a low. Let's see. All right. Looks like that worked just fine. So hopefully that gave you a good, quick example of how you can use this MP3 trigger. We see that now it's off. So press the button again, it'll trigger it back on. Okay. Now there are some advanced functionality here if you want to check it out. So we can go to examples. Then we can go back down to SerialMP3Player and then check out the basic commands. If we load this up, what's cool about this is it gives you a bunch of different options here. So we can actually see all the different cases that we can enter in. If I open up the serial monitor, it will display all the different commands that I can use. And if you take a look at the code and what the functions are that are used in the code, you can see how to play different files, folders, play, pause, stop, go to the next or previous, change the volume, do some really cool things that are a little bit more advanced, but really helpful if you need them when you want to do more advanced applications with this serial MP3 player. So hopefully that gives you a good quick overview of how to use the YX5300 with serial control so you can play MP3 files. And good luck with your projects.